Hello, I'm Tamara Caulder Richardson, and welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I'm your host, as well as a 6-time near-death experiencer, an afterlife speaker, an evidential psychic medium, and Christ Chandler. And today we have an amazing guest. It's going to be so much fun. But first, I want to go ahead and tell you, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like, tell your friends, and watch. So we have some really exciting people coming up, not only near-death experiencers, but past life experiencers, alien experts, other dimensions, time travel, who knows? Just stay tuned. All right, so I want to talk about our guest tonight, and then I will bring him on. And our guest, which is Simon Braun, I guess is Bound. He is a past life regressionist. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about his background. He has a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy with the UK National Council for Hypnotherapy. He's done a lot of training. You probably know him from his podcast, which is the Past Life Podcast. He is a professional past life regressionist, which I can't wait to hear about some stories on that. You might also know him as well as not only the, having different people on his show, but he's been on other people's show too. So Simon has a name out there, and I'm so thrilled to have him on tonight. And he's going to be talking about a lot of things. So let me go ahead and just bring him up and join the stream. Hello, Simon. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing great. Well, look, I thought there's so many things I want to talk about, your background and your past, but I thought, why not do that with you here? And I have more as we go through it about how you got your training and why. So some of this is going to even come out even more. I've learned so much about you just by talking with you, and, your love for sci-fi. I love sci-fi too. But there's something that most people might not know about you, but you're an author of a couple books. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I've always loved science fiction, even when I was really small. My favorite TV show was Star Trek, and I just always loved it. And it just got to a point one day, I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and there was an episode, and I thought, this is a terrible story. I could do better than this. And so I sat down and I started writing, and I really enjoyed it. So I wrote more and more science fiction as time went on. I wrote a load of short stories, and I wrote a novel. And I have them right here.
That's impressive. Yeah, please show us. Okay, so this is Immortal Suicide. And
Yep.
when was that released? And tell us a little bit about it. Let's see the back of the cover too.
That was 3 or 4 years ago. And
okay, let's see. Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice.
I've sort of brought in a couple of things that I've thought about through afterlife, in a way. The aliens that I have in it, who are sort of the bad guys, are transdimensional and come from some other universe or other dimension, and that they don't completely cross over into our space. And it can be difficult to communicate with them, which is almost like mediumship. They don't completely cross into our space, and so there's good guys and there's bad guys, but there's a weird kind of thing where the guys you could be rooting for are also a bit bad, and the bad guys are also doing something a bit good. And I wanted to have not just a straight ahead good guy bad guy thing.
So let me ask you this: which episode of Star Trek that sucked? Was it one of the movies? Which one that got you? You're not going to say. Okay, that's okay. Fair enough.
I can't remember.
Okay, yeah, I was a big fan of that. And a trivia here: I was born March 22nd, just passed, that same day as William Shatner. Almost the same day and time. There's a lot of similarities. I'm just a girl version, really there is. But so I do have a fondness. I actually saw him do in a big, huge theater a stand-up, and he talks about his life. It was really fascinating. I don't know if you know much about it. He grew up in a burlesque theater with his mom. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, it explains a lot about him, doesn't it? So now tell us about your other book that you worked on. You said this is short stories, sci-fi short stories, and when did this happen?
Yeah. This is what I started doing, writing the short stories, and they're kind of what I always do is I try and do something that I've never heard before. Just try and be different, which is probably impossible. Every story's been written in some way, and you just try and emulate your favourite writers. And there's two British guys that I really love: is Peter F. Hamilton and Ian M. Banks. And Ian M. Banks also writes under the name Ian Banks when he writes fiction.
Okay.
And it gets really complicated, and the books are like this thick, and there's 3 of them in a trilogy that make up the one story. And
so it's a whole world. It's a whole world. You're involved in a whole world. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's quite escapism. You wonder with these different worlds. Well, we'll get to this a little bit later. Are we just recalling past lives on other planets? I personally think yes, but I think that's why we're so intrigued by that. So now can they buy these books? That is Immortal Suicide and November Asteroid. Can they purchase that on the Amazon and so forth?
Yeah, they're on Amazon. They're on Kindle and physical.
Okay,
obviously, because I've got the physical one.
Wow, that's impressive. So, and there was one other thing. I'll go ahead and slide that in so I don't forget that people don't know about you, because this just came up in a chat pre-show. We were talking about for Valentine's, my husband got me a bass, but you played bass for 35 years and you were in a funk band. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was, we were doing our own songs. It was all original stuff that sounded kind of like Jamiroquai.
Oh, and then he's my favorite of all time.
Yeah. And then we'd be out doing gigs, getting paid to play people's weddings and corporate gigs and playing clubs and pubs. And that was all disco and funk. So it was a lot of that kind of thing, So, I mean, I've been gigging just about every weekend since I started. And it's only now with COVID that I've had a break from it. But I've always got, I'll just show you.
Yes, I'd love to see it. This is fascinating. You're a very creative person. That's beautiful. It's a Fender. Let's see the rest of it. Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Yeah, it's beautiful. So you've got a 4-string.
I got one here next to me here, one next to the bed, one next to the TV. And,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's, it's funny. I've always been really intrigued by bass, and I've been watching these different people play bass on YouTube, and I want to learn the slap funk bass because I'm obsessed with that. And so I walk around the house doing like air bass guitar. My husband's like, oh my God, I'm just going to buy you one. I'm sick of this. So that's that's fascinating. Yeah. I love Jamiroquai, and I love Chic, and I love all that. So that's a neat little trivia that people don't know. So yeah, you're extremely creative. And I find that a lot of creative people are more open to investigation, whether it be the afterlife, the paranormal, the supernatural. It was funny, the interesting example. There used to be a show on in the States that was a medium, and she had different celebrities on the show. And they had basically, not at the same time, but over the period of a couple of years, like the whole cast of The Sopranos. And they were all, they were actors, but they all had like really several paranormal stories, and they were very comfortable and open with it. So I think that I've noticed that with people that are creative, that and spirit seems to like creative people because they know that they're open. So that's just an observation. I wanted to go into, before we go into too much. Oh, by the way, I got to show the viewers the podcast. This is your t-shirt. I'm promoting your t-shirt. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can. Hold on, guys. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is, I don't know if you see it, Past Life Podcast. Okay, so I've got the t-shirt on. I thought it was adorable. Tell us how your daughter came up with this, and you can purchase this, and Simon, you can tell people where to get it. This is an adorable idea. How did you come up with it?
Well,
it's like a little band.
Yeah.
It's so precious.
We talk about life between lives and hypnotic regression and past lives. And there's the soul group that you work with throughout reincarnation. And whenever I heard somebody say soul group, I always thought of Stevie Wonder. He's got a great soul group.
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of crossover. It's a band as well as that group.
Oh gosh, I just thought it was it was just so clever and cute. And your daughter did this. That's really clever. So, but you have other t-shirts too that have the Past Lives Podcast just with the letters and so forth. And they can, once they go to your website, that will take them to that, right? Merchandise.
Yeah, it's on Teespring. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's and of course, Simon's will have the information below so you can connect to it. And if you want a really cool, groovy t-shirt too. So let's talk about you as a child. That really intrigued me when I read your childhood. I went, oh my God, that was so me. I could not get enough. I would be like terrified. I remember being 3 years old and watching paranormal, the werewolves, UFOs, Bigfoots. My whole life, I've been interested in this, and I see you have too. It's just, I mean, honestly, I still do. My books and things that I watch, I still watch sci-fi and things like that all the time.
Yeah.
Tell us about your childhood. You you weren't right.
I know that used to be a thing, wasn't it? That was the bad thing, but now it's the cool thing to be a nerd geek. Yeah, I would get the books from the local public library on anything kind of paranormal or supernatural. I remember 10 years old getting the books on UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot and things. And over time, I became more interested in either UFOs or the afterlife side of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
I remember having a really weird dream twice that was really powerful, and I was very young, but it's always stuck with me of just being in some way collected by these beings and taken somewhere. But it still seems like a dream, but it was so powerful at the time, and it happened twice. But
really? So how old do you think that you were? So you were not adult. Were you a teenager? Something like that?
No, I when I think about it, it was before I could talk. It was that young. And
You have that memory. That's good.
Yeah, it's a weird one. And I had a couple of other things over time, like hearing things in my bedroom and hiding under the sheets, and also having a thing where I found myself standing next to my bed and looking down on it. And there was
that's cool.
some kind of a creature lying in my bed where I was.
Really?
And then suddenly I was back in the bed and I was awake. And it was like I was awake throughout all of it, but I kind of jumped about. There were black spots in that short memory.
Okay, so what did the creature look like? Do you remember?
It was, I'd say it was like demonic, is what I'd say.
So do you remember what it looked like, or did you just feel it was creepy?
No, it was definitely demonic. I'd say almost like a dragon, but I wouldn't say reptilian, because it was much more nasty looking. If you ever seen, pictures they have of reptilians, that they are kind of smooth skin and look like reptiles, but this thing was horrible.
Right. I have seen that in my mind's eye. I have. Don't you love having these conversations with people like us that it's normal? But yeah, as a kid, I would see different things. I would see the kind that looked like they were humanoid, and they would crawl on the walls, and they were black, and they'd have a long tail and red eyes. But I've seen the ones that are also, they look black to me, but they have scales, but they're more gnarly looking than that, more like almost like a horned toad, and they were demonic.
And how big were they?
Like a man. Well, bigger than a man.
Oh, that's really big.
Well, yeah, I would say, 8 foot. I mean, big. Yeah, I could see them. We're getting into dimensions already. I feel like that they're from another dimension, but I think that, the question is, can they cross into our dimension, or can we just observe? I'm able to observe. You are too. I think it's because when we're in that sleep state, we're relaxed. We're not thinking about worldly things. We don't have the monkey mind. And then right when we sort of kind of wake up, a lot of times you'll see things. Or sometimes you could be woken up out of your sleep. Woken up. Were you woken with this thing, or how did you recognize it?
It seemed like I was awake. It seemed like I just came to awareness, woke up, standing there next to my bed, looking down on it. and
Okay.
then it kind of moved a little bit, and then I was back in the bed and I was awake. But there was no point where I got into bed. It was I was either
Mm,
standing or when I was in the bed. There was
mm.
no in between.
Okay, so I've had a black shadow stand in the past when I was a kid. They don't mess with me now, knock on wood. And they would stand over my bed. I would also see them in the corners dark, and they would come out and go. See, that's why when people say, I want to be a medium, I'm like, okay, what about all this other stuff, the stigma that comes with it that some people that don't understand, and having to see stuff that's creepy and you have no one to talk to. Really, you want all that too? Because there's a lot that comes, with that. So I just had Leo Bonomo, who's a UK medium, fantastic medium, and guy, and we were talking about the same thing, and he's seen things too as well. So did you tell in your mind's eye telepathy? Did you say go away or?
No, no. It was very quick when it all happened,
Okay.
and I was really quite scared. So
Yeah.
I must have been 6 or 7 years old.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? Can I tell you? Because we're like friends now. We've already talked once. You know what I think? That I think it just really likes your energy. You got a really smooth, nice energy, and you're creative, and your patterns of thinking are different than other people. And I just think it liked your energy. It was checking you out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But
Well,
I
luckily
had
it
the
didn't
same
come
thing.
back.
Oh,
But
that's good.
this reminds me of something. I interviewed this woman on the podcast that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talking about a moment she woke up next to her bed, and like early hours of the morning, and there were three greys at the foot of her bed, and she woke up standing next to her bed, and she
Yeah.
looked at them, and then she looked round at the bed, and she saw she was still in bed. It was like her astral form had come out of her body,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
she could see them. And as soon as she realized that, she snapped back into her body and looked up, and the greys weren't there. So it was kind
Mm.
of like the greys were in the beyond the veil in the astral plane that she could see when she was having her out of body experience. And
Wow.
it makes me wonder, they could be around us all the time. We just don't see them.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too, because I think there are certain times that we're I hate to say this, when you're really tired, like you've been working a lot and you haven't had enough rest, and you're so tired that you don't know whether you want to eat or go to sleep, but you also have to shower, and you're like, I don't know if I can do all three. I'm so tired. When you're really, really tired and you have days of being tired, you let your defenses down psychically. And well, you don't ground very well, and you're not very, but you're also more open, because you're not caught up so much in this world. Your rudiments are out. So it's a lot. Many times you'll see things during duress or during things like that. I think that there are so many things that are always around us. Tell us about that. Now, okay, so the scary demon thing, got that. Now, what about the alien? You said you had, I mean, I know you've got so many stories. Oh, and before we begin, when you were a kid, did you used to watch The Night Stalker?
No, no, I don't think we had that in the UK.
Oh my God, you got to go back and see that, because that's what the X-Files was created after. Darren McGavin of the Night Files. I was a Night Stalker. I was a little kid, and I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing. It's still good. And there was nothing like it back then. And that's how the X-Files was created after that. So
I
you can
I
still
remember
look at
watching,
YouTube. Go
there was a
ahead.
UFO show called Project Blue Book. I remember watching that.
Mm, yeah,
I
the
think
new one's good. Have you seen the
yeah,
Project Blue Book, the new one?
no,
Oh
I haven't.
God, that's good. And why they canceled it, I have no idea. It is fantastic. It was like 2, maybe 3 years, and then they stopped it, which they've stopped a lot of TV series. But the new one is fantastic. You should be able to check that out too. That's funny. I'm curious. So go back to you said you had a UFO experience. Are you willing to talk about that?
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I was. It's funny because twice I've seen UFOs, and they're both while I was driving and on the way to a gig or on the way back from a gig. And the first one was the early '90s, and I did a blues gig in this town that was out west of London. And so it was 1 a.m. on a Monday morning. I was driving back into London on this motorway called the M40. And, you know, we drive on the left. And ahead of me on the left, there was a really bright light in this field. And I was the only car on the motorway. And I remember looking at it and thinking, that's a bit odd, because I know this motorway and there's no houses there. And it's 1 a.m. and I'm thinking, why is there such a bright light over that field?
Right.
Maybe it's emergency gas works or a burst water main or something, and they had to do emergency works. And I slowed down, and there were some trees there. And then as I got past the trees, I looked up, and there was a UFO right there. It was maybe 200 feet from the side of the motorway, 50 feet off the ground, the size of a huge house. It didn't move an inch the whole time I saw it.
So it just hovered?
Yeah, and it was completely silent. And I slowed the car down to maybe 5 miles an hour. I had holding the steering wheel and leaning right forward, looking up at it. And there was masses of red pin spotlights across the bottom, and a really powerful spotlight pointed at the ground from one end of it. And it was shaped like a rugby ball. And the spotlight was so powerful, it was almost like it was a solid pole made of light. Really? And then I just started speeding up and driving away, which seemed a bit weird to me now because I have such an interest in UFOs, and I just drove away and left it. And also that powerful beam of light made me wonder, because, you know, you hear these tales of people being abducted and they're taken up through the light. And maybe that I was watching an abduction in progress at the time. But I got home and
Why not? Yeah.
I got home and I checked the clock because I knew about the missing time sort of thing. And there was no missing time. So I felt safe on that.
So you weren't going in the light this time, so that's good.
Yeah.
You're right. The light could be, instead of a light source to illuminate, maybe the light is a form of transportation.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Right. So that could make sense. And then what was that's wild. Did you have any fear with that? Were you fearful?
No, I was interested. And it felt just otherworldly. It felt like this is just madness. This can't be real. And so you just feel weird rather than afraid. Did
you ever tell anyone, afterwards? Or I
told a couple of people. I talked to my brother. I've got two brothers. One of them's really interested, and the other one immediately starts saying, shut up, don't tell me.
Are you kidding?
Yeah,
that is so funny.
He says, stop it, you're creeping me out. I don't want to know about this stuff. So,
right.
But the other time I was driving to a gig, and I live on the south coast of England now, and I was heading up to this town west of London. So it was a couple of hours drive. And on the way up, I was crossing this area called the New Forest, which is it's like a park, a natural trust, they call it. You're not allowed to do anything on it. It's protected land.
Sure,
so
right.
You definitely couldn't have a fire on there, like a barbecue or a bonfire or a party.
Sure.
I mean, animals just roam around, and they have these little roads. You drive down the road, you'll come around a corner, and there'll be two horses just standing there in the middle of the road. So it's that kind of a place. And so I was driving on the only road that goes across it, and to my right there was a large orange ball of light above a tree, and it didn't move an inch, just like the last time. And it was about the size of a car, and the whole area of the ground underneath it was lit up. It was so bright. Wow. And I wanted to stop, but the road just had bushes on either side. There was no way I could pull over, and there was lots of traffic. But I slowed down, and it was like 30 to 45 seconds I could really pay attention to it. And that's quite a long time, really.
It is.
And you go through a kind of mental checklist. You think it's not a helicopter, it's not an aeroplane, it's not a hot air balloon. And also I've heard about UFOs that are these kind of bright orange orbs, and that's what it reminded me of. But then I had this weird synchronicity when I was driving back, and this was at 2 a.m. and I was listening to an interview where this guy, Mike Cleland, was interviewing a UFO alien abduction guy. And
that's crazy.
They were coming. I was going across the New Forest, And Mike Cleland was talking about this thing that happened to him where he woke up one night at this house. They lived in the countryside, and he was bright light coming through the back window. And he sat up in bed and looked out, and there were 5 greys walking towards his house. And he heard this voice in his head that said to him, now is the time to shut down. And he said he just lay down, put his head on the pillow and went back to sleep. And these 5 grey aliens were walking towards the house, and behind them was a big orange light. He said he couldn't see a craft, it was just a light. So I'm crossing the New Forest, and I get to exactly the point where I saw the orange light. The UFO expert says, and you know what that orange light was now, don't you? And it felt like he was talking to me when he said that. It was this kind of synchronicity.
At the same time, that is synchronicity. Yeah. What do you think the orange light was?
I don't know. What he said, this guy, is that you won't see a UFO unless they want you to see them. They want you to pay attention in some way. And the way he described it is like they're giving you a smack on the ass. They're saying, hey, pay attention. And so it might have been that. They might have just showed themselves for me or somebody else who was driving, and I just happened to be an innocent bystander.
You know, I think all of this evolves our soul, because when it expands our horizons and how we view the world or the worlds or the universe. The universe is so it's not like that you were heard or anything. I think that's kind of cool that you were able to witness that. You know, you wonder, you know, what is, when you talk about energy and energy frequency, and, you know, I'm looking at having, there's a lady who's a bioenergy specialist, and about sound and sound therapy and this whole area. But when you talk about light and light waves and the speed of sound, then I guess we want to ask, you know, light not being just an illumination, but what would light be? Light would be could be energy. We talk about this as near-death experience. There's a light energy. It could be a perception of energy, but it could be also energy that could be manifested into another form. It could be a stagnant, it could be a moving form that could be manifest into a solid form. It could be just a cloaked kind of leader in there, like, let's protect the leader.
Right, you know? Yeah, who knows?
That's a cool idea. So yeah, who really knows on that? That is fascinating. Now, you said you had your own experiences with little grays, or you felt, was that the one you had a couple dreams?
No, this was another thing when I was being taken through a past life regression by a lady who was using the quantum hypnosis. I can't remember what it's called. It's QHHT.
Okay.
And I think it was Dolores Cannon trained her in this hypnotherapy technique to do past life regressions. And we went through this past life regression, which I could tell you about, where you know, I saw a past life, and then I went through the death of that life, and I found myself as some kind of a light ball looking down on the dead body of that lifetime. And the hypnotherapist started saying to me, okay, now just drift away from that. So just tell me the next thing you see. You drift away into the clouds. And I saw myself on the table, like a classic abduction scenario with these alien greys around me. But the thing was, I felt all of my muscles in my body. It's almost like they were turned to jelly, and they started shivering. And she told me afterwards she could see it I was lying down on this little bed with a blanket over me. She said she could see me shaking. And I went from feeling fine to 100% terrified. And it was like somebody flicked a switch. There was no build up. I went from 0 to 100. And she was saying to me, okay, tell me what you see. And I didn't want to tell her what I saw, because I thought, this is crazy. How I was supposed to be doing a past life regression. We didn't talk about aliens. There was that, you know, because hypnosis is the power of suggestion. And maybe if we'd been talking a lot about aliens, it might have suggested some kind of fake memory or something coming up. Sure. So I found myself there, and I was shivering, and I stopped for about 5 minutes, and I came out of the hypnosis, and I told her about it, and she said, all right, we'll go back into it. And I went back into it, and then it was this weird thing that happened. I found myself standing up at the end of the table, I was naked. I had a grey either side of me. And then the next thing I knew, it was like they planted a vision in my head. It wasn't that I actually felt I was there. And I was standing in this open area. It was like the middle of a forest where a load of trees had been cut down. And in the sky, there was a planet. And it was much, much closer than the moon. And coming from that planet was this pathway. And all these children were coming down the pathway dressed in white. And at the bottom of the path, they came to where I was standing with all these adults. And they were greeting them and hugging them, and it was all big smiles. And then I heard this sentence in my head that said, when the planets meet, the children will return. And it was almost like the Greys had showed me this and planted that idea, those sentences in my mind. And I said this to the hypnotherapist, and she said, oh, that sounds very encouraging. And I don't know where it came from, but I just said, no, there's something wrong with this. And I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
And then I was back in that space with these two Greys, and they led me to the wall, and a hole opened up in the wall. And it was like a cookie cutter shape of me, my arms and legs and my head, and I fit perfectly in it. And it didn't go through into another room or a hallway.
Mm-hmm.
It just went into this kind of energetic space that was all colors. And it was like I imagined being teleported, and I was just going through this space. There's other humans in there I was aware of. And I found myself in this little white room with these bench seats and the clothes and pajamas all over the floor. And there was this kind of feeling. There was other people in there, and they were getting dressed, getting their clothes back on. And it was this kind of feeling like the aliens were saying, no one goes home till you got your clothes back. And then I went to the end of this little room, and there was a hole in the floor, and I went down through that hole in the floor, and I was back in my flat in London. And it was about 2 a.m. and I just went to bed, got up the next morning, went to work like nothing had happened, completely forgot about it. So that was something that was a kind of a recollection during a hypnotic regression to do past life regression. And I still have doubts that any of it was real. And I have discussed it with a couple of UFO experts. Mm-hmm. And they kind of say it likely is something real, something did happen. And but I'm still skeptical. You know, I'm always skeptical of so much of this stuff. I think you've got to keep an open mind, but at the same time, don't just accept everything.
No, I agree. It's a healthy skepticism. Sure. I mean, there's certain things that I read. I'm like, I don't know what to think about that. So I got it. I'll just put it on the shelf. You know, you don't have to make a decision about things. You can say it could be real. It could not be real. And even if it is real, what would it mean? What could you really do with that? And then, it's a bigger picture. You were not the only one. So there's probably some kind of agenda for humans, right? If you want to go deeper, right? So there's something going on. And if there is an experiment, or if they're following us, what do they want to know? What information? So, what is that? That's fascinating. I think that what to me might be the giveaway on that is the fear. Because if you go through something, which I told you, I've had a lot of past life and in between life regression years ago. And I just had one, I guess, a couple of years ago before the COVID with Dr. Linda Bachman, and did some in-between stuff, and I've seen all sorts of stuff. But what usually to me, I think, is a dead giveaway is when you begin to feel emotional, kind of something more simple. Like if I'm in medieval times and I saw a horse in that session, I was like, I love this horse, and I wanted to pet it, and I had emotion and strong feelings, and I had strong feelings about the people around me and how much I cared for them. So I think that the fear, you can't fake emotion. You can't fake being really afraid.
Yeah, that's what I see. Yeah, when I take people through past life regressions, that's one of the kind of verifications. And I've also felt these things as well. And I felt all sorts of weird stuff, especially if I've gone into a past life where I'm female. And, it's like I saw a past life where I was a nurse in the First World War, just back from the trenches, and all these British soldiers were coming into the hospital and terrible injuries. And I remember the nurses' uniforms, I saw them in the past life regression, and I Googled them later, and it was exactly what I saw in the regression. But during the regression, I remember this feeling of, it was like, why do I have to wear all these long skirts? They're just getting in the way. I'm trying to do my work. You know, and being a bloke, that would never occur to you.
Yes, that's a great example. And it's funny, you're not really supposed to do that, but I've done that. I'm like, I've run stuff and I've looked the person up because I get the whole name and I've looked him up. I'm like, oh my God. One I got was a guy that was, he owned a railroad. He said he owned tobacco. He owned a railroad. He said he lived in this place, and I can't recall right now. I have to look it up. I wrote it down, all this stuff. But he had a place in Kentucky, but it wasn't Kentucky. It was called something else. Well, and he gave me the date, and he owned the land, and he was not a good person. I was not a nice person. I took my parents home. I scammed them out of their business. I'm not like that now. I'm really not. Scammed them out of the business. I had tons of slaves, which I had babies with all of them, and denied it. I mean, this was a horrible, and the person that was doing my past life session was an African-American guy. He's like, it's okay. It's fine. You know, I've run being a mobster. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh, but I looked it up, and the place that he mentioned was in the railroad company existed, but it was pre-map. It was like, meaning it wasn't even Kentucky then. The place he named, I couldn't find in a normal map. But when I went to the date of the map, that's what it was before they brought it into Kentucky. So I thought that was super cool. So I think that we just have different lives that we learn different lessons from, and we definitely have been all things. But you're right, you get real personal, like, why this dress is in the way, and you're a man. Why would you think that unless it's real? So, yeah. So the UFO thing, you know, gosh knows, it probably happens to a lot of people.
I know,
and we don't know about it.
We were talking yesterday about you said you got this feeling of like I was being tagged.
Yeah, and you're right here.
Yeah.
I said that. Well, I asked permission first. It's just, guys, I don't believe you should just read people. I asked Simon, could I look at this? And he's like, okay. And I got a feeling you were being tagged like cattle, and that you're in a group, like a survey group. It's not like you in particular, but you're like in a group, and so is your family. And but there's a group of people, not just your family, but other groups. And I don't know what group you're in, but it's like a survey. But then you have on your right ear, there's it's like you've been tagged or something. There was something, I kept being drawn to the right upper ear. So, and then you said that there was like a little knot there.
Yeah, yeah, and it's right here. And I went like this as well to check the other ear in case, oh no, this is just how your ears are, but there is something under the skin here.
Yeah, I think, I don't feel what I feel with that. I don't think it's malicious, although let's define that. I mean, you know, if you're non-emotional entity, alien, and you're just doing research, it might be real personal to the person you're doing that and terrifying. So, you know, it depends what viewpoint, but it just feels like a tracking device. But I mean, you know, you figure, you know, some people say that our own government wants to track us. So, you know, why not aliens? Maybe they thought of it first. I don't know. I've actually run a past life where I was on a different planet. I was a fighter pilot. I was a female. And I was being implanted, and all these grays were around me and implanted in my ovaries to carry a child, which I didn't want a child because I was a fighter pilot. I didn't want that. And that was a past life. It was on a different planet. So, you know, gosh, who knows? I mean, the big picture, who knows? And you're just someone who's remembering something, you know, like, you know, what does that mean? What about the people that don't remember?
Yeah,
right?
I suppose it doesn't affect them. And I suppose there could be a PTSD thing that comes up, something, but they don't know what the source of the PTSD is. They don't know why they're getting these traumatic feelings. And that's when you can stumble across it during hypnotic regression, perhaps.
And, you know, this is a really good point to kind of segue also about your training. And, you know, we know that you're interested in the paranormal, science fiction, all of this, and not to make this less. I mean, I want I want people to understand like how you kind of moved into the regression, because like with me, Someone may beg to differ, but it would be really difficult for someone to do, like, if I'm trying to pinpoint, let's say, a compulsion, a worry, a PTSD within myself, let's say, because it may not even be this life, because I've done so many things that it may be so weird finding it. I couldn't go a normal route. It may not even be this life. And I think that that's the advantages. The first time I ran something with a past life, I wasn't running past life. I was just running a regular, it was just a regular session, regression. And I went past life and I saw my hands and all this stuff. And I was like, oh my God. And then I, went through the whole thing, but it tied to this life. I always never liked people touching my head. And it wasn't because I was prissy. It's because last time I trace it down the track, I got bonked in the head and killed. So, my postulate might have been, don't let anyone touch your head. So it really didn't even have to do with this life. Had to do with those balls and chains that you do in medieval times. It was used to be like how we have tennis tournaments and people go watch it. It was like that, but it was a joust, but it wasn't a joust. It was more like ceremonial, and there was a picnic afterwards and people got dressed up. But instead, this guy bonked me in the head. It wasn't a war thing like the movies. It was just ceremonial. And he hit me and knocked me in the head because I liked the girl he was dating. Well, I didn't know till after the fact because I was, dead. But that I traced all the things had to do with my head all the way back there till it finally went away. And then I didn't have attention on it anymore.
Yeah. So, and by learning about it, you kind of released the energy and broke the connection.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I thought it was funny, and I didn't have any attention on it anymore. I thought it was very funny when I finally got down to the main change, to the one that started it all. It just blew. The whole thing was gone. I didn't have a focus on that anymore. So tell us, how did you get involved? Because there's so many things that you could do. How did you get involved, and what made you decide to get training as a past life regressionist?
It's weird because in the 80s, I used to go to the College of Psychic Studies in London.
It's a famous place. Yeah. I would love to teach there. That's cool.
Yeah. And I would just book sessions there because you could go and sit with people, mediums, clairvoyants, and channels, and that's where I had my first past life regression. And sometimes a medium or psychic would say to me, "You're going to be a healer." Not yet, but further down in your life. And that was the late 80s. And I always felt like, no, I don't think so. I can't see that being me.
But you are.
Yeah, but then later I decided that I did want to do this, but I had to get proper training. I think there are people who will start doing it without proper training. Oh. And sometimes over here you can do a hypnotherapy course. It would last a weekend and you'll get a certificate, and then you can say, I'm a hypnotherapist. But my course was 10 months and, hundreds of hours in the classroom and loads of case studies and working with people, and all the students would hypnotize each other. So I've lost count how many times I've been hypnotized. And then I got my diploma, and then after that I started doing hypnotherapy, which was helping people lose weight or stop smoking, those kinds of things. And I wanted to do the past life regression, and I did 2 or 3 with people, and they were fine, but I felt like I needed a lot more training. So I went and got the certificate in past life regression therapy, and that has been really good. And I learned a lot there to do with the therapy of past life regression, because before it was just like doing an exploration,
right?
But now it's more focusing on, if somebody has an issue that they want to work on, then I go through a process, and there's 3 different hypnotherapy sessions. Each one's past life regression, but all 3 are different, and they get more intense as you go along, and you really get focused in on these issues and the source of the issues in the past lives.
Really, that is really fascinating. That is something that I haven't heard of, and I think it's terrific, because some of these things, if it's let's just say, make up a word, compulsion, right, or whatever that is, and if you and you can't really trace it in this life, and if you do something like a past life regression, you go through it all, and then at some point it's going to, whatever it is, pop up. And when it does, sometimes it can be really upsetting with people to move through it and to understand it. And I would think that you do need therapy. Some of these things, not to mention seeing death, some of these deaths are very upsetting. You know, I mean, like, you know, I was thrown down a well once. Of course, when I ran it, I was like Casanova. I was a guy. I was like sleeping with all the wives. So, of course, the husbands threw me in the well. But it was very upsetting because it's how I died, and there were a bunch of rats. So, you know, you need someone who's really knows what they're doing, so they can, if you're terrified, they can say, okay, well, go past this, or go before this, or let's move to another life. They can get you out of that, right?
Yeah, I did a past life regression where I saw myself burned as a witch, but during the regression, it was funny. It was funny. I'm saying it's funny, but there was this point where they started the fire, and then I was out of my body, and it was almost like the soul jumped out of the body, so it didn't have to experience the pain, and you just saw it happen. But also, if you're taking somebody through a past life regression and they have something where experiencing the emotion is not useful, you can use different steps to take them out of it, and saying, if you still want to see it, you can say, okay, you're no longer experiencing it, but you're somebody else in the room and you can watch it. And if that's still too much, you can say, okay, now you're in a movie theater and you're watching this on the screen. So each step is taking you further away from the emotion, but you can still see what's going on. You can still learn from it. But there's other
example. I love that, because not everybody does that. So that's beautiful. I love that, because you can find people that you said just to get a diploma for a weekend. That's scary, because sometimes you get into these things and you want someone trained to get you out if it becomes too terrifying.
But also part of the therapy can be that you need to experience that. There's a thing that it's your spirit guides who are showing you this life for a reason, and you might have something in this life that's traumatic or whatever, and they know that you go back to this particular past life, you'll see what happened there that's causing this problem in your current life, and you go into that emotion, and that's where the release of energy is. So sometimes if somebody gets very emotional, we'll say, okay, go into this. What's this all about? We don't shy away from it. We say, okay, this is why we're here. And then after the hypnosis, people say to me, that was amazing. I feel so much better now that I've been through that, and I understand it, and I've released the energy. And I go through a whole process of energy release as well, and getting agreement from the subconscious not to bring this through from a past life. And there's a whole process there. And it's
nice.
Can be very effective.
I love that. I love the way that you handle things. That's good. And what the other thing is, a lot of times when I come out of these things, if they're heavy, I need to like be familiar with the room, because I just don't know where I am. I'm just spaced out, you know, and just like, you know, I would like start looking at things and touching things to like, okay, you're here now, you know, because these things can be deep. That is so cool. So I want to go over a couple other things. I know we've got a little bit of time left, and I wanted to make sure that we covered a couple other things. Tell us, if you can, before, you know, because we've got a few more minutes, is there any that just stands out, odd, we don't know the name, any kind of past life regression that you did that you thought, that's unusual?
There was a woman who, she found herself in a desert, and I think she said it was kind of a rocky desert. And I said to her, okay, so I do this thing where I want to get people grounded in that life. So we do the basics, like what gender are you? How old are you? You know, what are you wearing? And I said to her, well, if you look down, can you see what you're wearing? And she didn't really answer. And then eventually she said, well, I didn't want to say, but I'm naked. I said, okay. But she said, the thing is, it's not a human body. I don't know what it is. But it's me, I'm standing here. And then we tried to move on from that and find out what's the next thing that's happened, or where do we go from here? And it just wouldn't move on. She got nothing coming to her. But that was an interesting one. And there was another woman who said, I'm in a cave and I'm really fearful. They're coming for me. And I was like, well, who's coming? She said, they're like rats. They're about human size, but they're like rats, and they're looking for me. And I said, well, if you look down, what are you wearing? And she says, well, my legs aren't right. It's like each leg's got two knees. And I'm hiding in this cave. So that was another, that stands out as being a bit of a weird one. And
Yeah,
I had another one. This woman, she said her brother died recently, and she was in this past life where she was a little girl in a kitchen about the Victorian era, and her father was there, and her mother was there doing the cooking. And she said, oh, my brother's just walked in the room. I said, what, your past life brother? She said, no, my brother, he died a few months ago. He's just come in now here in this past life regression, and he's just come to tell me he's okay.
Oh, that's cool. Why not?
That stands out. That's a bit of a weird one. So it's also, I tell you about it, and this happens, but it doesn't happen very often. And I have to say that in case people want to contact me and say, yeah, I've lost someone, I want to meet them in a regression. And you just can't guarantee that. You just don't know what's going to come up with that much detail.
There are guided meditations that can help you with that. But the way that I say that our loved ones are always around us, especially when we think of them or look at a picture, they're usually like, oh, they're looking at me, I look good, or whatever. They do usually know. Or I'll say, Earl, do you have a picture with you that you brought to the reading? And they'll go, yeah. I'm like, yeah, they're telling me that. It's so funny. I used to do these stage medium demonstrations, which, the COVID I had to stop. But one of the first ones I did, and it was at an entertainment complex, and it was a nice place with sofas. And a friend of mine, she had a comedy, she taught comedy, and she had a comedy club there. And she said, why don't you do something here? You'd be great. Okay. So I found early on that people would bring stuff with them of the person that's deceased, but they would bring odd things. Like one lady, I said, uncle came through, and he was like Billy Bob is the South. And I said, you've got his Skull Bandit chewing tobacco? She pulled it out of her purse. Yeah, right here. And I'm like, but they would bring strange things, not like normal things. One lady had a whoopee cushion. And I'm like, and she pulled it out of her purse. So I'm like, I never even thought about someone bringing something with them. Like, it's not necessary. You don't need to do that. But I guess it's sentimental. So they would bring their stuff with them. So that's unusual. But yeah, I can imagine you really can't guarantee really anything except for to trust the process that is going to be helpful. And tell me how you think it's helped people that you've seen as far as past life regression, so they understand this better.
Well, there was a guy who contacted me, and he had a pain in his lower abdomen. And he'd had it for ages, and he'd had 4 procedures, I think, with doctors, and they couldn't find where it came from. We went into past life regression, and he went into one past life where he said he was kind of dressed like the 4 Musketeers, that kind of look. And he got into a duel, and he was stabbed in the lower abdomen. And so we did an energy release for that, and then we moved forward. And I thought we might move forward in that life, but we jumped spontaneously to another life. And he said he felt this tremendous guilt. And I said, well, if you could say where that is in your body, where is it? And he said, it's my lower abdomen. And so we did an energy release for the guilt he was feeling. And then we did another session. It was about a month later. And he said, this pain in my lower abdomen, it's decreased so much. He said, it used to be so sensitive, I couldn't even touch it. But now I keep prodding myself to test it because I can't believe this pain's decreased so much. And it hadn't gone 100%, but it's about 70 or 80% gone.
Wow, that's a massive improvement.
Yeah, and there was a woman who came to me for one thing, but we just seemed to go somewhere else. It's almost like the spirit guide said, no, we know what's good for you. We're going to take you somewhere else. And she saw herself as a passenger on a motorbike, and in that life it was her father who was riding the bike, and she was a girl on the back, and he crashed the bike and he died, and she broke her back. And she said in this life she's always had this pain in her lower back, and she's never been able to explain it, but since the regression it's kind of released a bit, and every time she thinks of the regression it kind of warms up. She gets this really warm feeling in her lower back. So you see these kind of connections happening, and also it's almost like energy moves on from there, because there was a woman who was in a past life and she couldn't feed her 7 children, and her father had left her, and a couple of the children died in that past life, and she realized one of them was her son in this life, and he was about 7, and he'd always had a problem with food. He'd refused to eat any food that was good for him. He always had upset stomachs. And after the regression, he got better. For a week or so, all of his stomach pains disappeared. And so she had done a regression, but he got a benefit from it somehow. So maybe some energy transfer, I don't know. Or maybe it's just the way she treated him was different, and he just responded to that.
Wow. Well, I think that what's going on here is that we are eternal spiritual beings, and when we may not recall offhand these things until because they're hitting, and we have amnesia. But when you do the past life regression or in between life regression, and whatever comes up, it comes up, like you said, your guides present what needs to happen to help you with your healing and where you are right now. It's amazing. We hold these things in because we're so powerful, and then we have these bodies which we're so much more than our bodies, and it can impinge upon us in certain areas. I didn't do a past life, but I did this life where I had amnesia in between, in sickness and illness in my NDEs, and I had that uncovered, and I had all sorts of things that left because of it, because I didn't know I was being sexually abused when I was out of it. I didn't know that. And when I recovered that, I was like, oh, no wonder I didn't really like them. But all sorts of elements that I had, I used to have as a child, all sorts of nervous stomach problems that I had to run to the bathroom as first grade. I have none of those problems. That went on until I was about 38. I have absolutely none. It totally blew because it was hidden underneath. That wasn't even a past life. So I think we're very powerful. And, to me, there's nothing, the greatest journey you can go on is the journey of your own soul and yourself. That is the greatest journey. And people are always saying, oh, what's my guides or what's this? I'm like, you got a lot going on just with you. The past lives, you might see other planets. You might see you've been an alien. You might see you've been a caveman. So I wanted to thank you for your time. I know we're at the end of our chat here, and I wanted to tell people, first of all, where to get in touch with you if they want to. First of all, listen to the Past Life podcast. Simon is fantastic. He's a really interesting guest. Please listen to that, and also go to his website, which is pastlifehypnosis.co.uk. And you can also get one of these really cool t-shirts, and he's got one with just the letters, which is really neat. You can support the channel too as a patron, right? Which is also on there with membership. And with memberships, what do they get with memberships if they want to support your Past Lives podcast?
Well, there's 2 tiers. There's a $2 tier where you get a bonus episode every month, and a $5 tier where you get a bonus episode every week. And with both those tiers, you get access to the back catalogue for those tiers. So there's over 100 bonus episodes now. So it's only $5 a month, and there's 100 bonus episodes plus a new one every week.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I know what are you now, 151? How many episodes have you done so far? Quite a lot.
Yeah, it's over 150.
Wow.
Each one's an hour-long interview with somebody who's had some kind of experience or is a researcher.
Right. And again, that's part of the quest that you were saying earlier, that this fascination and curiosity with the mysterious and the supernatural led you to a professional lifelong search for the afterlife, which that's what you have a lot of your guests, right? With their interest, which I was just on your show. So whenever that is released. So that was exciting. I can tell everybody I was on Southern Belle show now. I'm so excited about that. Well, look, thank you so much. And guys, stay tuned. Look, let me tell you what, if you love this, we're going to just Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Simon's time is 10 p.m. We are going to, because he's in the UK, he agreed to come back for 1 hour, and we're going to get into some really juicy stuff. We're going to talk about soul groups, not just the t-shirt soul groups like a band, but why do people incarnate in soul groups? What is really reincarnation? Are there such a thing as past lives? Or are there different lives going on with different dimensions at the same time? How many bodies do we control? And how many different species are there? I don't know, but we're going to be talking about all of this and more. So stay tuned, which will be April 2nd, tomorrow night. So thank you so much, Simon, and I will see you tomorrow in the live chat.
Right, okay.